Isis and Osiris, the lovers who defied death. Osiris, beloved king of Egypt, ruled not by fear but by wisdom. Wherever he walked, rivers seemed fuller, the air sweeter, crops bending heavy with grain. His eyes shone with calm justice. Yet within the green and gold of his lands, envy grew like thorn among roses. Set, his brother, whose heart thrummed with chaos, could not bear the peace Osiris carried. Set fashioned a chest of rare cedar, polished, cunningly carved to fit a man perfectly. At a banquet he announced a contest. Whoever could lie in the chest with exactness would claim it as a gift. Kings and nobles tried, laughing at the clever jest. Yet when Osiris lay within, the lid fit him as if the tree itself had grown around him. Sealed with iron, sealed with molten lead, the chest became a tomb at Set's whim. With a cruel hand he cast it into the Nile, and the waters carried Osiris away. Isis heard the rivers lament. She did not weep like a mortal, for she was no ordinary woman. She was a goddess of craft and magic, of hidden ways. She traced the Nile from source to delta, barefoot, wind in her hair, her hands weaving spells over marsh and sand. Every tear she shed grew into papyrus and reed, every sigh called the core of birds. And in Byblos, far from her home, she found the cedar chest, embraced by a tree that had grown around it like a living shrine. She opened it and held Osiris close. But Set's malice was relentless. He found them once more, tearing Osiris's body into 14 pieces and scattering them across the breadth of Egypt, each fragment a silent wound upon the land. Yet Isis did not falter. In the guise of a falcon, she swept across dunes and swamps, calling on her sister Nephthys to aid her. Together they journeyed from city to tomb, from riverbank to desert, gathering Osiris's pieces. Every fragment they recovered became sacred, a temple, a shrine, a living memory of love's endurance. One piece, swallowed by the river, could not be found, but Isis, in her unmatched cunning, wove another with her magic, and in its place she restored wholeness. With Osiris reassembled, Isis wrapped him in linen, whispering words older than the mountains, older than the Nile itself. Life stirred within him, a warmth like sunlight through reeds. Osiris opened his eyes, yet the world of the living was no longer his to tread. He descended into the duat, the realm of the dead, where he became lord and judge, granting eternity to the righteous. Before this realm, the world had not seen the fullness of Isis's power. She conceived Horus, who would grow strong in secret, learning justice and vengeance in equal measure. Set's wrath could not touch them, for the love between Isis and Osiris had braided life into immortality itself. The tale of Isis and Osiris is sung in the rushes, in the flight of birds, in the turning of the river. It is a story of devotion that defies even death, a testament that love, once forged, cannot be broken. Even now, when the Nile rises and the stars shimmer above the sands, the spirits remember, a goddess's love can bind what the world seeks to undo. Inanna and Dumuzi, the descent and the return. Inanna, radiant queen of heaven, goddess of love, war, and all things ripe with life, walked among mortals and gods alike with a presence that turned hearts to longing and eyes to awe. Her beauty was fire, her laughter the pulse of rivers, her gaze a storm that promised both ecstasy and peril. Yet even she, sovereign of desire and power, knew the weight of what it meant to rule. There came a day when Inanna turned her eyes downward toward the underworld, a realm of shadow and silence ruled by her sister Ereshkigal. The darkness called to her, not with fear, but with an inexorable pull. She resolved to descend, to know what lay beneath the world of the living, to claim authority over death as she had over life. The gates of the underworld were many, each guarded by a sentinel who demanded a relinquishment of pride. With each gate, Inanna removed a token of her power, her crown, her robe, her jewelry, until she entered naked, stripped of all earthly and divine adornment, standing vulnerable yet unyielding before her sister. Ereshkigal, once bright and beloved, now ruled alone in anguish and rage, and she struck Inanna down, hanging her lifeless on a hook in the heart of shadow. Above, the world trembled, seasons faltered, rivers ran dark with mourning, and the land itself began to wither. Inanna's absence was a wound in the sky, a silence in the laughter of children, a coldness in the fires of hearths. Yet the goddess had not failed entirely. Those loyal to her, Ninshuba, her devoted servant, the Anunnaki, and the forces of love itself, petitioned the gods for her release. Through entreaty, cunning, and sacrifice, she was granted life once more, but only on the condition that someone take her place in the underworld. It was Dumuzi, her beloved shepherd, radiant of form and gentle of spirit, who accepted the fated exchange. Inanna's choice was not cruelty, but trust. In him, her heart found courage to mirror her own sacrifice. He descended into shadow, while she returned to the living, renewed with knowledge, grief, and the bitter sweetness of love that demands loss. Inanna emerged not merely as queen of heaven, but as a goddess who had tasted death and returned. Her power deepened. Her love for Dumuzi became legend, a rhythm of seasons. He would spend half the year in the world above, where life bloomed and rivers ran, and the other half in the underworld, where darkness shaped him, tempered him, and bound him eternally to the cycle of growth and decay. Thus the earth itself learned of their love. Crops sprouting in the spring mirrored Inanna's return, wilting in summer and autumn marked Dumuzi's descent. Lovers whispered their names in hope and longing, poets sang of a devotion that could endure death, shadow, and separation. Inanna and Dumuzi became a living testament. That love, even when fractured by fate, flows like a river, inevitable and unquenchable, shaping the world above and below, and so the tale endures, whispered in the wind, traced in the turning of the seasons, a hearth-story of passion, courage, and the strange, unyielding endurance of the heart. The goddess who wept for her beloved. Freya, radiant daughter of Njordr, goddess of love, beauty, and the hidden magic of the world, moved through the realms with a grace that made the wind pause and the stars shimmer in her wake. Her eyes held storms, her laughter could stir joy in the coldest hearts, and yet within her was a longing that no treasure, no song, no mortal lover could satisfy. For she loved Odin, a god of wandering, of song, of mystery, whose absence and return marked the very rhythm of her life. Odin was elusive, ever on a journey, his eyes carrying the distance of mountains and the hush of forests. He wandered far from Asgard, far from the warmth of Freya's embrace. Yet she did not chase with anger or demand. Her love was deeper than desire. It was patient, enduring, a river flowing through the realms of gods and men alike. When Odin disappeared, the world trembled for her. Freya's heart, impossibly large, fractured with longing. She wept tears of gold, drops that fell to earth, and became the precious metal men would seek and covet for all time. Her sorrow was a song, a lament that echoed across forests, fjords, and mountains. Every creature that listened knew her pain. Even the silent stones seemed to hum with it. She rose in her falcon cloak and journeyed across the worlds, through storm and frost, through hidden valleys of the gods and secret pathways of the mortal lands, seeking her beloved. She asked the rivers, the winds, and the trees, and though none could reveal his path, they bore her sorrow, carrying it across the lands as a warning, a song, and a blessing all at once. Finally, she discovered that Odin had been captured by forces beyond her sight, swept into distant realms where mortals feared to tread and gods could scarcely follow. But Freya did not falter. She bartered with spirits of the unseen, spoke words that shaped the air into bridges, and walked the hidden paths of the cosmos. And when at last she found him, her joy was so fierce it seemed to set the stars ablaze. Yet Odin remained restless, a god of wandering and longing, unable to stay. He left again, but now Freya had learned the eternal rhythm of their love. It was not possession, but devotion, not permanence, but the pulse of return and departure, absence and reunion. Wherever Odin went, her heart went with him. Wherever she wept, the world learned of beauty born from longing. Thus Freya's tears, her gold, her sorrow, and her joy became a sacred legacy. Lovers sought her blessing. Poets whispered her name in longing, and the cosmos itself remembered. Love is not bound by chains or permanence. It is the ceaseless tide, rising and falling, returning always to those who wait with hearts brave enough to endure the ache of absence. And so Freya weeps and waits, Odin wanders and returns, and in their dance the world itself learns of desire, devotion, and the mysterious enduring power of a heart that loves without end. Persephone and Hades, the queen who divides the year. Persephone was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, whose hands coaxed life from the earth. Wherever Persephone walked, Flowers rose to greet her, crocus and hyacinth, rose and poppy, and her laughter made the meadows bloom. She was spring itself, bright, untamed, unaware that innocence too is a season that must fade. Beneath the soil, in the deep halls of shadow, ruled Hades, king of the dead, lord of what lay beneath all things. He was not cruel, nor did he hunger for conquest. His kingdom was silence, his crown heavy with solitude. Yet when he saw Persephone wandering among the fields, her hair radiant as dawn, something within him stirred, a longing not for possession but for companionship in the endless dark. One day, as she reached for a narcissus blooming brighter than all others, the earth opened beneath her. The flower's roots tore loose, and from the chasm below rose Hades in his chariot of obsidian and gold. The horses, dark as starlight, thundered across the horizon as he carried her into the underworld. The meadow fell silent, only the torn flowers whispered her name. Demeter searched ceaselessly for her child. She wandered the earth with a torch in each hand, her tears becoming rain, her grief turning fertile fields to dust. Crops withered, rivers shrank, and the world fell into hunger and mourning. Even the gods took notice, for humanity starving ceased to give offerings, and without their reverence Olympus trembled. Meanwhile, in the shadowed halls of Hades, Persephone did not wither. The underworld was strange, yes, filled with sighs and echoes, but its ruler treated her with a solemn respect. He offered her a throne beside his own, not as prisoner, but as queen. Slowly, Persephone's fear gave way to curiosity. She learned the language of roots and stones, the secrets of the dead, and the quiet dignity of endings. The spirits called her gentle and just. Yet longing for her mother grew heavy in her chest. When Hermes, the messenger, finally came with Zeus's decree that she must be returned, Hades did not resist. But before she left, he offered her a single fruit, a pomegranate red as blood and sunrise. Persephone ate 6 seeds, not knowing that each seed bound her to the underworld for 1 month of every year. When she returned to her mother, the earth rejoiced. Grass unfurled, buds opened, birds sang her homecoming. But when the time of descent came, and Persephone returned to Hades, Demeter's sorrow again veiled the world, and winter followed her daughter underground. Thus began the turning of the seasons, life and death, ascent and return. Persephone was no longer the maiden of spring, but the queen of 2 worlds, bearing light into the shadows and shadow into the light. She taught mortals the sacred rhythm, that every bloom will fade and every seed must die to rise again. Hades and Persephone remain, even now, a tale of balance. He, the stillness beneath, she, the pulse of renewal above. Together they remind the world that love is not always gentle, it is cyclical, transformative, inevitable. Each year when winter deepens and spring stirs in the soil, their story is told anew in every leaf that falls and every bud that dares to bloom again. Shiva and Parvati, the cosmic dance of destruction and creation. Before the mountains had names and before rivers learned their songs, Shiva dwelled in silence. He sat upon the peaks of Kailash, wrapped in tiger skin, his hair knotted with serpents and moonlight. The world pulsed with creation below him, bustling, yearning, endlessly becoming. But Shiva's gaze was turned inward, his heart attuned to the stillness beyond all form. He was the destroyer, yes, but also the purifier, the one who unmade so that creation could breathe again. Far from his solitude, the goddess Parvati was born, daughter of the mountain king, radiant with warmth and compassion. She had heard stories of the ascetic god who shunned the world, who held the Ganges in his hair, who saw truth beyond illusion. And she loved him, not for his power, but for the depth of his stillness. Her love was not fragile, it was the kind that endures storms. She left her palace and all its comforts and went into the wilderness to seek him. Through heat and hunger, through seasons of snow and sun, Parvati meditated beside Shiva's shadow, her devotion unshaken. Birds nested upon her shoulders, roots grew around her feet, and still she chanted his name. At last, even Shiva, unmoved by gods or demons, opened his eyes. Before him stood Parvati, not a princess but a mirror of his own divine truth. She had matched his austerity with patience, his silence with serenity. In her, Shiva saw not illusion, but completeness, the energy that gave motion to his stillness, form to his formlessness. Their union shook the heavens. When they joined, mountains trembled, rivers overflowed, and the stars themselves paused in reverence. Their love was not tender in the mortal sense, it was vast, elemental, the joining of opposites that made the cosmos whole. From their embrace was born balance, Parvati the Shakti, the power of becoming, and Shiva the consciousness that observes. Together they became Ardhanarishvara, half male, half female, fused in eternal equilibrium. Creation and destruction, motion and stillness, birth and dissolution, all flowed from their dance. But even divine love is tested. Once, when Parvati playfully covered Shiva's eyes, the universe plunged into darkness. In that brief moment, countless ages passed, for without the light of awareness, creation faltered. Realizing this, Parvati withdrew her hands. And from the darkness sprang Kali, fierce and wild, embodiment of time itself. Thus, from love's innocent gesture arose the reminder that even the tender can awaken the terrible. Yet Shiva did not condemn her. He understood that every force has its echo, that even destruction serves creation. When Kali's fury grew unbearable, Shiva lay before her, and seeing her beloved beneath her feet, the goddess calmed, for love tames even the fiercest power. So it is told, Shiva and Parvati do not merely rule the cosmos, they are its pulse. When lightning flashes, it is Shiva's glance. When the earth blooms, it is Parvati's touch. Their story is not one of conquest or submission, but of perfect union, where masculine and feminine, stillness and movement, meet in harmony. Their love is the breath between endings and beginnings, the rhythm by which all things live and die, and so the world turns, endlessly renewed by their dance, the dance of destruction and creation, of silence and song, of Shiva and Parvati eternal. Aphrodite and Ares, love and war entwined. When the sea first birthed Aphrodite from its foam, the winds carried her beauty across the world like the scent of myrrh and roses. Even the gods turned their eyes toward her, for in her face was both tenderness and peril, a sweetness that could wound as surely as it could heal. She was not only the goddess of love, but of irresistible desire, of longing that made mortals and immortals alike forget reason. Zeus, fearing what such power might unleash, gave her in marriage to Hephaestus, the divine smith. He was steady, kind, and patient, a god of creation whose hands forged beauty from flame and metal. Yet, though he loved her deeply, his craft could not cage her spirit. Aphrodite was flame itself, and no hearth, however warm, could contain her. Ares watched her from the shadow of battlefields, his armor gleaming with the blood-red light of the setting sun. He was the god of war, fierce, impulsive, brutal, yet alive in a way few others were. In Aphrodite he saw not softness, but reflection, the fire of his own chaos mirrored in beauty. Their attraction was instant, dangerous, divine. They met in secret, in hidden chambers of Olympus, when the clang of war had quieted and the forge fires slept. Their love was not gentle, it burned. Where they touched, roses bloomed and iron melted. Hephaestus's workshop filled with the scent of passion he could not name. Yet the gods, quick to gossip, began to whisper. When Hephaestus discovered their affair, he did not rage like Ares, nor weep like mortals. Instead, he built a net so fine it could not be seen, woven of unbreakable bronze. One night, as Aphrodite and Ares lay entwined, the net fell upon them, binding them in a glimmering trap. Hephaestus summoned all the gods to witness their shame, and laughter shook Olympus. But Aphrodite did not weep. She met their mockery with a smile that silenced them all, for even bound she shone like dawn. When the net was lifted, Ares vanished to Thrace, where war raged endlessly. Aphrodite, returning to the foam and myrtle, did not forget him. Each time battle erupted, she felt his heartbeat across the fields of men, and when love stirred among mortals, he felt hers, fierce and unyielding. They were never truly apart, for love and war are born of the same flame. From their union came children who carried both their passions. Eros, who could wound with his golden arrows as deeply as any blade. Harmonia, goddess of balance, whose very name was a prayer that love and conflict might coexist in peace. Even now their dance continues. Ares in the thunder of drums, Aphrodite in the sighs between heartbeats. Love calls forth courage, war awakens desire. Together they remind the world that passion, whether in peace or battle, is the same divine fire, the will to live, to burn, to feel, to create. And so when lovers quarrel and then embrace, when nations fight and then rebuild, the old gods stir in remembrance, for Aphrodite and Ares still rule the secret heart of humankind. Eros and Psyche, the soul's trial through love. In the time when gods still walked among mortals, there lived a princess named Psyche, whose beauty was so radiant that even the statues of Aphrodite seemed pale beside her. Men came from distant kingdoms not to worship the goddess, but to gaze upon the mortal girl whose face carried heaven's own light. The altars of Aphrodite grew cold. Her temples, once filled with incense and song, now stood silent. Jealousy, sharp as a thorn hidden in a rose, took root in the goddess's heart. "Let her learn what beauty costs," Aphrodite whispered to her son Eros, the golden-winged god of love. "Make her fall for a man most vile, so she may know despair." Eros obeyed. But when he saw Psyche asleep, her lashes trembling in dream, he faltered. Her soul shone with a purity that pierced even his immortal heart. His hand trembled. The arrow meant to curse her grazed his own skin instead. From that moment he was undone. Love had turned upon its master. Soon after, Psyche's beauty, which once drew adoration, became her curse. Suitors feared her, offerings ceased, and her father, desperate for guidance, sought the oracle of Apollo. The god's voice, hollow and pitiless, declared, "She shall not wed a mortal man. She is destined for a monster who waits for her upon the mountain." So they led her, veiled and weeping, to the crags above the valley. Her family watched from below as the winds rose, but instead of claws or darkness, a soft current lifted her, carrying her gently to a palace of gold and ivory that shimmered beneath moonlight. There an unseen husband came to her. His voice was gentle, his touch tender, yet he warned her never to look upon his face. Love, he told her, must live by trust alone. For a time, Psyche was content. Each night he came to her, and by day, unseen hands brought her food and music. But doubt is a whisper that grows loud in silence. Her jealous sisters visited and planted suspicion in her heart. "If you cannot see him," they said, "how do you know what he truly is? Perhaps he is a serpent, a beast who waits to devour you." One night, while her husband slept, Psyche took a lamp and a dagger, trembling as she approached. When the light fell upon him, she gasped, for there was no monster. There lay Eros himself, radiant and beautiful, his wings folded like silk, but a drop of hot oil spilled from the lamp and touched his shoulder. He woke, sorrow in his eyes. "Love cannot live where there is no trust," he said, and he was gone. Psyche wandered the earth, her heart shattered, searching for him. She prayed to every god, but only Aphrodite answered, and not with mercy. "If you seek my son," the goddess said, "you must prove yourself." 4 trials she gave her: to sort a mountain of grains by nightfall, to fetch golden wool from deadly rams, to draw water from the source of the Styx, and lastly to descend into the underworld itself to retrieve a box of beauty from Persephone. Each task was impossible, yet unseen forces aided her: ants that sorted grain, reeds that whispered of safe paths, an eagle that fetched the water, and a voice that warned her not to open the box. But temptation is a subtle poison. Psyche, weary and curious, lifted the lid and fell into a sleep deeper than death. When Eros learned of her fate, his heart broke anew. He flew to her side, brushed away the shadows from her face, and kissed her back to life. Even Aphrodite's anger could not stand against such devotion. The gods gathered, and Zeus himself declared Psyche immortal, for she had proven that the soul, her very name, could endure suffering, temptation, and death, and still rise into love. Eros and Psyche were wed in the golden halls of Olympus. Even Aphrodite smiled, for she saw that her own power had been tested and transcended. From that union of love and soul was born a daughter, Voluptus, joy, the divine child of all hearts that suffer and survive. And so it is told, love begins with desire, but becomes truth only when the soul is willing to descend, to suffer, and to awaken. The torch of Psyche still burns within every heart that dares to trust the unseen. Odin and Frigg, the Allfather and the Weaver of Fates. Before the worlds were fully formed, when Yggdrasil's roots still bled dew from the mists of Ginnungagap, there sat 2 thrones upon the high seat of Hlidskjalf, one for Odin, the Wanderer, Allfather of gods and men, and one for Frigg, his queen, the silent spinner who knew all destinies yet spoke few aloud. Odin was restless, always searching, for wisdom, for power, for the hidden runes that bound the cosmos. He gave an eye for knowledge, hung 9 nights upon the world tree for secrets, and sent his ravens Hugin and Munin to gather every whisper of Midgard and beyond. Frigg's knowing was of another kind. She needed no ravens. Her sight came through the threads of fate she wove each dawn, threads of birth and loss, of kings rising and worlds fading. She was the only being whom Odin could not outwit, for her knowledge came not from pursuit, but from stillness. Together they ruled from Asgard, and though Odin's journeys took him far, to giants, to seers, to the dead, always he returned to Frigg. For even the Allfather's storms needed the stillness of her hearth. They had many sons, though none dearer to Frigg than Balder, the bright, the pure, whose laughter could calm the 9 realms. It was said that wherever Balder walked, flowers bloomed, and even Hel herself smiled. But shadows grew beneath the light. Balder began to dream of death, dark, cold, unending. Frigg trembled, for she knew dreams were the language of fate. She rode through all realms, swore oaths from every being, everything. Fire, water, iron, beasts, stones, trees, that none should harm her son. All swore, save one, a small mistletoe, growing pale and humble on an oak. Too young, Frigg thought, too harmless to matter. Then came Loki. Ever cunning, ever cruel in jest, he learned of the mistletoe and shaped from it slender and white as bone. During the games in Asgard, when gods laughed and hurled harmless spears and stones at Balder, all bouncing off untouched, Loki placed the dart in the hand of Hoder, Balder's blind brother. "Try your aim," he whispered, and when Hoder cast, the mistletoe flew true. It pierced Balder's heart, and light died from the world. All of Asgard wept. Frigg's cries reached the roots of Yggdrasil. She begged for one to ride to Hel and ransom her son. Odin's other son, Hermod, rode down the shadowed road past the Hel Gate to plead with the queen of the dead. Hel agreed if every being in the world wept for Balder, she would release him, and all wept, gods, men, stones, beasts, save one. A giantess, or perhaps Loki in disguise, refused, and so Balder remained in the underworld, and Frigg's heart broke anew. Odin's wrath burned, but even he, for all his power, could not undo what fate had spun. For Frigg had seen it all before, though she had not spoken it. She knew the pattern of the world's end, knew that Balder's death was the first crack in the wall of Ragnarok. Yet still she sat upon her throne beside Odin. Still she spun the fates quietly, her distaff humming like a low storm. Odin might wander, might rage, might seek the runes again, but in the end, it was Frigg who understood what must be accepted, that wisdom without love is barren, and that even gods cannot escape the tapestry they weave. And when the last battle comes, when Odin rides against Fenrir and Frigg's tears fall like rain upon the ashes of worlds, it is said she will yet spin again, for from her sorrow the new age will be born. Thus the Allfather and the Queen of Foresight remain bound, wisdom and fate, knowledge and acceptance, 2 halves of the divine balance that keeps the worlds from falling apart. Hecate and Hermes, the keepers of the crossroads. Between every world there are doors, and between every choice there are crossroads. At those places where silence thickens and paths divide, 2 presences move unseen, the whisper of wings, the shimmer of torchlight, Hermes and Hecate. He, the fleet-footed god, son of Maia and Zeus, lord of messengers, merchants, thieves, and dreams. He travels swift as thought, bearing the words of gods and the souls of men. She, the torchbearer of the night, daughter of the ancient Titans, older than Olympus, crowned in serpents and silver flame. She walks where others dare not, between shadow and light, life and death. They meet where boundaries blur, at the fork of roads, at the threshold of temples, at the mouth of caves. No temple binds them, no vow restrains them. Theirs is not the union of passion, but of purpose, a sacred accord between movement and mystery. When a soul dies, Hermes leads it down the dark road toward the underworld. But when the shades gather at the gates, it is Hecate who stands there with her torches raised to light the final crossing. One hand guides, the other grants passage. Together they ensure that no spirit is lost between realms. In the quiet hours before dawn, when mortals dream, their powers intertwine. Hermes governs the dream's message, the swift current of meaning, while Hecate governs its shape, the veil and symbol through which truth is shown. Thus, prophecy and magic share their breath. It was said in old Thessaly that witches invoked both names before casting spells of travel, divination, or transformation. For Hermes knew the language of gods, and Hecate knew the silence of the void. and between word and silence all creation could be commanded. Once, it is told, when the Olympians sealed the underworld from mortal sight, Hermes grew restless. "What is a messenger with no path to tread?" he said. And Heti, who had walked the shadow paths since before the gods were born, took pity. She led him deep into the earth, through caverns echoing with lost prayers. "There," she said, pointing her torch toward a black stream that shimmered like mercury, "lies Lethe, the river of forgetting. Even gods must forget to be reborn." Hermes knelt, touched the surface, and saw himself reflected in her light. "You remind me," he said, "that even the swiftest traveller needs a destination, and even the keeper of doors," she replied, "needs someone who knows when to open them." Since then, they are invoked together at liminal rites, at the new moon, when offerings of honey and garlic are left at crossroads. Hermes receives the message, Hecate delivers the omen. Their steps mark the circle that joins the living and the dead, the visible and unseen. No lovers, no rivals, but equals. Two forces that weave between all things. For Hermes moves through space, Hecate moves through time. He carries the word, she carries the silence that gives it meaning. He brings the soul to the gate, she grants it safe passage through. And in the trembling light of crossroads, where three ways meet and torches burn blue, it is said that if a traveller listens carefully, they may hear two voices, one laughing, one whispering, and feel the air tremble with unseen wings. That is the blessing of Hermes and Hecate, not comfort, but direction, not peace, but knowing where you stand between worlds. The Morrigan and the Phantom of War, the shadow that loves the storm. She is called many names, Morrigan, Mucha, Babib, Nemain, but all are faces of one force, the sovereignty of death and battle, the dark mirror of life's fire. Where she walks, crows gather and warriors feel the thrill and terror of their own mortality rise like iron in the blood. The Morrigan has no husband in the mortal sense, for who could wed the storm or bind the river of fate? Yet there are moments in the old tales where her presence joins with another, with gods of war, with heroes doomed by destiny, with death itself. Her most famed consort, if one may call him that, was the Dagda, the good god, lord of earth and plenty, whose club could kill with one end and revive with the other. They met before the battle of Mag Tuired, when the Tuatha De Danann prepared to face their enemies, the Fomorians. The Dagda sought her counsel by the river Unius before dawn. There she stood, washing the armour of the dead who had not yet fallen, the washer at the ford, the omen of fate. But when he approached, the air changed. Death and life met and did not destroy each other. They lay together on the riverbank as the waters murmured of doom and renewal. From that union came not a child, but a pact that she would lend her power to the Tuatha, and that the Dagda's earth and her storm would be one force on the field of battle. And so, when the battle came, she rose into the sky as a raven, shrieking prophecy and terror. It was said that her cry drove men mad, that her shadow turned courage into frenzy, and that through her voice the land itself chose who would fall. She was not cruel, only honest. For the Morrigan is not death's malice, but its necessity. And when the last of the Fomorians fell, she did not rejoice, she sang. A song of triumph and sorrow, of endings and beginnings, open quote. Peace to the sky, sky to the earth beneath sky, strength in every heart. Close quote. Yet not all her loves were divine. She was drawn once to a mortal, Cuchulainn, the hero of Ulster, fierce as flame. She came to him in many forms, a young woman offering love, a raven foretelling doom, an old hag milking a cow. But Cuchulainn, proud and unyielding, spurned her each time, never understanding who she truly was. So when his end came and the spears of fate struck him down, it was she who perched upon his shoulder as a crow, watching the life fade from his eyes. Not in malice, but as witness. For she alone loved him enough to see him die as he was born, unbroken. Thus the Morrigan's partner is not a single god or man, but the moment between life and death, the instant where power and surrender meet. She mates with destiny itself. In the hidden lore of poets and druids, she is sometimes paired with the Phantom of War, a nameless spirit said to arise wherever men march to battle. Together they dance in the smoke, she the chooser of fates, he the hunger that drives them. Their union births not life, but legend. And when the wind turns cold and ravens circle above fields grown quiet, it is said her whisper can still be heard. Open quote, I am the shadow that follows victory. I am the kiss that closes the hero's eyes. I am the womb that births the world anew. Close quote. For the Morrigan is both end and beginning, both wound and healing. Her consort is the storm itself, ever dying, ever reborn.